Welcome to This Week in X, presented by Crushing Comics, and we are here to discuss a brand new X-Men #1. Before we get into our full discussion, we're going to just tell a little snippet of our favorite thing about this issue, starting with Tyler.
One word. Sesclops.
Fariha.
Marvel welcomes Lex Luthor as the villain. And you, Peter?
Using the mutant metaphor to educate rather than just appropriate. We have a lot to talk about, including the X-Men getting together to form Voltron, because the X-Men is better when it's together. Let's talk about X-Men #1. All right, friends, we are here with a rare opportunity. You do not get too many shots at talking about a brand new #1 from an adjectiveless X-Men series. So we are going to give you our initial thoughts and then have a full discussion about all of the details, not only of this issue, but of the editorial concerns surrounding this issue. And of course, that's going to come with a lot of spoilers, as you would expect. We're here to spoil things for you. Get ready to get spoiled. But before we go into full spoiler territory, we're going to just give our feelings. So for X-Men #1, starting with Tyler, what is your reaction to this giant-sized introductory issue?
I'm of two minds here. There are things that kind of irritates me. And then there are things that work really, really well for me. And sometimes it is the exact same scene. So it is really difficult for me here. And the art is good, but the bar is set now. I mean, it's now set so high for Pepe Larraz. I don't think it is fair to him, to say. I mean, I just want to say that it's probably not fair to him to say I'm just a touch disappointed with the art in this issue. And, overall, I would say, I would still give this a 3.5 kaiju out of 5.
Fariha, what did you think?
A lot of the things I had problems with is because of the in-universe problem. It's like, this is a problem. Like some of the things that is questions being asked, I'm like, it makes sense in real world to ask this question. It makes no sense if in Marvel Universe, it just doesn't work. So that really bothered me. I was very happy to see an X-Men villain, a new villain, who is Lex Luthor. Let's agree. He's just not happy that others are bypassing him, even though because they have the power and he's a human and he's actually achieving. It's that thing. And I'm actually very excited to see that, because once again, it's not like, I don't like mutants. No, it's because there's a reason that he has to not like mutants or not like, so there was a lot of that. And then obviously the X-Men getting together, I kind of now I see why they picked the ladies, because Pepe Larraz cannot draw ladies differently, but because they have distinct hair, you can tell these are distinct ladies. So that's that. And so I was kind of and we got to see some of the team interaction and obviously the fight thing. And I was a little scared because when the Avengers and Fantastic Four showed up, it's like, oh, how is that going to play? It played well. I was happy, yes, New York, we need as many heroes as we can get in Marvel Universe.
Don't forget Spider-Man.
Oh, and that too. So I mean, yeah, so I think there's a lot of things I was happy with, but then very much like Tyler, a lot of things I was like, well, why is that a plot?
What I really enjoyed from this issue is that it managed to do superhero in a way that was interesting, that still felt layered, that still felt big, that still felt like there was somewhere to go, and that brought a sense of voice to the characters. I think, there's a lot of big Marvel superhero books right now that are some of the worst books out in the industry. And I can say that because I read 60 to 70% of the entire industry, Avengers, Fantastic Four, these are horrible comic books, and DC doesn't necessarily do a whole lot better with these big team superhero books. So maybe it's time, for the X-Men to retake their rightful place as the best superhero team in all the land, as they always have been. And in a way that's really digestible, but that does not hand away the bigness of it. So I think that was ultimately was impressive to me, was kind of those two ends of the scale. I think the small stuff with the characters really worked for me. And I think the really big thematic stuff really, really worked for me. I think the stuff in the middle, and neither of you said this, so maybe it's just a me thing, I hated the action. I thought it was dumb. But I personally personally don't like kaiju and I don't like giant robot Voltrons. And honestly, I'm kind of done with Pepe Larraz. I know everybody's on Twitter being like, this is the pinnacle of superhero achievement. If I can't follow your layouts and if I can't tell what the characters are doing, then you're not a good artist. You can make it look as flashy as you want with all of the great little shading and thumbprints and shit. But if I cannot follow the story, your art is not good. So I think that Pepe Larraz did an amazing job in Planet Size X-Men. But honestly, if I'm grading this down from a 5, and for me, it was like a 2.9 if I'm going to finally reveal a score, it's because the art just wasn't that great. So I think I really like thematically what's happening, and I look forward to when we get a different artist on the series. There is this thought that since Duggan is writing this and Hickman isn't, and Hickman only has his event series of Inferno coming up, no, it's such a small thing off to the side, right? That we've reached the end of the Hickman era. Hickman's not, and there's all of these permutations. Is Hickman gone? Are Hickman's plots over? Editorial decided Hickman wasn't selling well enough, and so or his book wasn't good enough, which I didn't think it was. But there's all of these versions of it, which I have to, I mean, I pride myself on not having insider knowledge. I mean, I know this is, some of you are going to not like me for saying this, but I think insider knowledge while the thing is happening is bullshit. It just makes you try to feel special. Like, I heard from somebody that, no, I'm interested maybe after the fact of having that perspective, but don't come to me in the week the comic came out and say like that you heard some gossip from somebody who heard it from somebody. Like, screw you. Okay. That's officially how I feel. And you know, if I'm talking to you, you know who you are. So, but yeah, but the thing is, I think it's obvious that none of those things are the case. Like, we have people out there talking about the plan has only gotten bigger, that there's more in store for Hickman. And so what if Gerry Duggan is just going to steer this main X-Men book for a while? Maybe Hickman was bored. It doesn't really matter. But to try to frame this as if the themes of from Hoxpox to now are suddenly going to get shuttered, this issue is full of themes with Hoxpox. This is as Hoxpoxy as the X-Men comics has been since Hoxpox. Am I the only one who's like tearing my hair out about this over here?
Well, I mean, to be fair, it didn't help when the Marvel advertising or marketing team, market Inferno as the accumulation of
it is accumulation.
Well,
it is
yes.
a culmination.
No, but that's the thing. Like, you focus on accumulation, you think that is the end because it's the accumulation of something and therefore full stop. You know what I mean? So that's the
English
part which kind of like, because of the word used and there's an implication there, and then that coincided with like Hickman handing the reins of X-Men over to Duggan, and everyone was just like, oh, I know. Well, look at this. A broken clock is correct twice a day.
So, and we rely on that to make sure that we're right at least 2 times per episode.
Yeah. So I was like, I mean, I could theoretically go say, hey, back in Hoxpox, who was the one who said Inferno is coming? Me. But I didn't do that because, it kind of wasn't really what I was thinking.
But it might say that in Krakoa on one of his shirts, folks. You don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, yeah. Sorry.
So what I'm saying, that even if he is gone, now what? What are you going to do with that information now?
Yeah, what does that mean? To what end are you a flutter about that?
Yeah, like, what information are you gonna do with it? Here's the thing. Here's gonna be a litmus test for people who watches this. The day I stop showing up on the channel, Hickman left. It's not a joke. It's not a thing, because I know as soon as he lives, they're gonna go back to their old mansion, doing their old shitty crybaby misery porn to make white people feel better, and I'm not going to read them anymore. So that's a litmus test. I'm still here, therefore. Yeah.
And to your point, I think that what's really interesting, and I think you threaded that needle perfectly with that comment, is the Hickman era, which is why I've stopped calling it the Hickman era. You will notice I always call it the Age of Krakoa now. What this Age of Krakoa is stepping away from this kind of like using the X-Men as a minority metaphor to placate non-minorities into thinking they're reading a book about minorities. Like it's the snake swallowing its own tail. This era of X-Men is like the first era to actually acknowledge truly what it means to see mutants want to succeed within themselves and get the chance to do that. And whether or not Hickman's writing the book or whether or not he's credited as the head of X or whatever, it's going to keep being the Age of Krakoa as long as those are the themes. It might even happen that Krakoa falls and the plot moves far pace. Maybe Mystique is really going to burn it down in Inferno. But I would argue that as long as we're playing with these themes about mutants saying it's finally time for us to win and playing with this idea that they're not in the back foot anymore, I think we're still going to be in this era. And Free is not going to leave just because Hickman's name is off when as head of X. If I'm taking your meaning correctly, Fariha, you're saying you're going to leave when the themes regress. And I don't think Hickman's the only person capable of writing those themes. I think we have a whole office. And from the very start, Hickman said that Duggan got the themes the best. When they first launched with Marauders, Hickman was like, Marauders is the one to check out first because Duggan has been incubating with these themes the longest out of everybody in the office. So of course he's the first one who's going to write the X-Men flagship. Maybe Vita is going to write it next because by that point they will have simmered with the themes enough. But I just think, I think that sometimes comic fans get a little too into, what is that wrestling word? Kayfabe? They get a little bit too into the marketing kayfabe and the editors showing up and what they're saying in all the interviews. Like, just read the books. Just decide for yourself when you read the book if the book's theme has changed, I guess is why I'm all wound up here. I'm like, stop trying to prognosticate because some marketing copy that some intern wrote at 8 o'clock at night because the solicits were due at midnight, you know?
The one thing I was going to say, though, is like, I am actually baffled by X fans or people who claim to that they have read X-Men because I have read a lot since then. Because I keep hearing that, oh, Hickman's era, I'm just calling it Hickman era because that's what they call it, that is like, oh, they have moved, like, you know, this has moved away from Xavier's vision of Xavier vision of staying with dream of staying with the
coexistence
with the mutants and humans
peacefully. That's always the dream.
I feel like every time the Sundance says that, I feel like the whole Decimation era, everything that Villain, Fraction, Brubaker did, they're just like, all those comics just sit there. It's like, are we potted plants? Or are we just nothing? Like, it just, I just don't get it. Cyclops bitch slapped Professor Xavier and told him, get out of here. I didn't forget that. You know, I recently read it. So I just don't know what this era that they were talking about. Like, what is this era? Stop following Chris Claremont on Facebook.
And the final thing, and then I promise we're really going to talk about this actual issue, is you also can, and this is complex, I know, you can dislike what Hickman's doing personally in this era and still find good things to appreciate about this era. Like, I've made no secret that I thought I have my stack rank that I do every month on Twitter of all the X-Men books. And I think the Hickman book is like my bottom book of all of the main ongoings. The only thing I have below it is like X-Men versus FF, I think, and Fallen Angels. But it's like, even though I was disappointed by that, I love this thematic stuff. And so I think you also can have been bored by some of the thematic stuff, still find positives and not be like, well, this is great because it got taken away from Hickman. Like, yeah, I like that it's written by Gerry Duggan because I think the character voices are going to be more interesting. I'm still interested to know what Hickman cooks up. I think Hickman might cook up something even better now that he's not tied to being the flagship guy. Like, let Hickman be weird. Let him go and do his own crazy mutant sidebar thing. So anyway, that's our editorial for today.
Hickman definitely need to do a Krakoan Unlimited or something.
Yeah, or whatever will come after.
Life of Moira.
Well, we'll find out 2 or 3 solicits from now because they just solicited Inferno number 2. Okay.
Yeah.
There's so many places to begin here, but I want to begin with what to me was the thing that I found the most affecting here, which is the X-Men take possession of some property on Central Park West, and they build a treehouse there. That is their new headquarters. But it's not just a treehouse, it's a public space. It's a true embassy to the people. And they named this embassy Seneca Gardens. And Seneca Gardens is not just a fictional thing they're doing. This ties into the real life history of how Central Park was built. a lot of that area in Central Park between 82nd and 89th Streets and 7th and 8th Avenues was originally Seneca Village. And this was a settlement that was founded in 1825 that was predominantly composed or comprised of African American landowners and a smaller contingent of Irish immigrants all living together. And at a point, you have to think there's just a slice of Central Park, what we know today of Central Park. There were over 250 residents living there. And when the city decided that they wanted this big green space because of Lower Manhattan just being like a cesspool at that time, they basically declared eminent domain. So gave many of these people money because they did own their land, but basically said, you've got to get out. And they razed this whole neighborhood. When it was raised, 1857, everybody was evicted and razed, and to the point that this was like forgotten by history books. It was only 250 people. There was no kind of sign. All of these houses are gone. How could you possibly remember? And it took, and even research had shown that there weren't a lot of people who were like self-identifying as like, oh, I was moved out of Seneca Village. And it took until the 90s for it to even enter back into conversation. And then there was actually a commission formed to actually investigate and kind of recognize this history. And that's only been in the past couple of decades. So this is a really interesting beat. I found it incredibly affecting. I think that it gave you enough things that you can go off and research it on your own. I'll include some of the sources that I kind of went through to learn more about this in the notes. And I'm very interested to hear Tyler talking because he does not live all that far from there. And the X-Men here, we've seen some colonial themes with X-Men, especially thinking back to Hoxpox. You have Xavier in his little hat and khakis and jodhpurs showing up on Krakoa and being like, well, this land will be our land. And Doug being like, you're not even listening to its language. But here's the X-Men going back and kind of literally taking, instead of just appropriating a minority culture, actually using an X-Men book in the mutant metaphor to highlight something that has been done to minorities, to people of color, to immigrants, and interpolate that into X-Men. I find that so incredibly affecting, but that's just me. So I'm interested to hear about Tyler, and if he's ever even heard about it as a New York resident, and I'm interested to hear from Fariha, and I'm interested to hear from all of you in the comments. I mean, I was floored by this. And to credit where it's due, Duggan on Twitter said that he consulted with Victor Laval, who's another writer who I love, who supposedly is going to be writing some upcoming X-Men stuff on this New York history. But over to Tyler.
I do not know, like, this part of the history of New York City. It actually caught me by surprise. I mean, I did Google it and read about it, but that was new to me. I mean, the thing I can say, and I probably will have a little bit more to say later on, is that piece by Ben Urich. That is really, really well written.
Yeah.
Like, it's so good. And a part of my dissatisfaction.
He's a very good reporter.
Yeah.
If you read Alias,
Cyclops thinks so. Yes, then it must be true.
Yeah, if you have read Alias by Brian Michael Bendit, I'm not making it up.
Yeah, he is the reporter of the
movie. So it's from there.
So I mean, everything that led up to that page, I was kind of feeling lukewarm, and then that page sort of recast certain things for me. And that is why I said that it was really, sometimes it's really difficult for me to, I mean, at least for this issue, for me to say, I hate this, I like this, I hate this, because I keep wavering because that data page was so well written. And I mean, we'll come back to that maybe later on. But Fariha, do you have anything to say about?
So there's one. I mean, I like the thematic element that Peter pointed out, and all of that. My thing is that why is it that every time Mutant goes somewhere, they have to make them a hero about how they're doing it? Like, why isn't it they're like, we're just gonna take this land, get out of here? Like, why does it need to be recontextualized and then be saying it again that, oh no, but they're doing a good thing? Because I was thinking about it from the point of view, and then because the thing is, the whole time I was reading it, I was kind of scared for them. I was scared for that. Oh, they're in New York, they're doing things, even though this is the exact same thing other New York heroes do. I don't know why in Marvel Universe people live in New York anymore, but they do. Anyway, but the thing is, I was constantly thinking, oh my God, like they're gonna be like, But the thing is, like, I'm like, I don't feel that when I'm reading an Avengers book. I don't feel that when I'm reading a Spider-Man book. But I think it came a lot of the way I live my life, because I've been told again and again not to make noise, to shut up, and then not to be like not to cause trouble. Don't stand out. Yeah. And I feel like it's a lot of that too. I'm like, why is it that there needed to be a heroism added to the fact that they just bought a bunch of lands? People buy lands all the time in New York. Why isn't it? Emma Frost just went, this ours, take it down. Like, be bold, take down Freedom Tower. Like, it's like, this is ours, take it down. We're putting a plant over here. So I don't know. And that's one of the reasons I'm like, okay, like, and a lot of it wasn't even like very apparent to me. And I think like the page that you were talking about kind of touches on it, right? A little bit. But the thing
and
is,
then
like,
the one before, the data page before, talking about growing the tree and things like that. Yeah,
right. So it touches about it. But but I was thinking, I'm like, oh, here we go again. We have to make sure that they're doing it kosher, you guys. They're not making any trouble. They're just here, like, they're
But
doing
isn't that
things.
The whole point of this Hickman hour? I mean, something that's become more prominent in conversation among people in the past decade than it has ever before is this idea that all of us who are non-Indigenous people are probably living on some form of settled, or we should probably say colonized land. And it's become really common to say, I'm living on unceded land of XYZ, right? And we're not even down to that layer of excavation in New York. The X-Men could go below the Seneca Village level and talk about whose unceded land was this to begin with. But at least to like acknowledge, like, look, we're here to be heroes, and we're not apologizing for buying this building. I mean, there was really great writing in the beginning of like, somehow nobody noticed, but the X-Men just bought this whole block. But then for the X-Men to arrive and be like, think of us what you're going to think, but we're actually going to acknowledge the history of this place. To me, that's what makes it part of this Age of Krakoa. It's one thing to have Krakoa, which is mutant land, and it's another thing to have a flying base, and it's another thing to go to Mars, which is Mars. But here they are, not just with an embassy, but trying to establish a space for themselves in a city. And they're like, in doing that, we're going to actually acknowledge what the history of this space is, instead of just being colonizers, which I think that like a lot of people would accuse them, like, oh, this is just mutants now, colonizing a human space. No, they're actually reclaiming the space to a degree. And that's part of the whole point of this era.
But by having only one Black character in the team.
Well,
no, we'll come to that.
There's layers.
We'll come to that.
But here's the thing. But that's what I was talking about, the in-universe problem. Avengers don't have to do that. Fantastic
but should they? Would it be more interesting if they did? Wouldn't Black Panther? No, Black Panther would just go to another country and be like,
Black Panther, yes.
Mansion.
Black Panther, yes. But the thing is, what is he doing in that thing? That also makes sense. Is it an embassy? Because yes, if it's an embassy, but even then, he can be like, I want to buy this land to make an embassy. Buy the land, make an embassy.
That's the X-Men book I don't want to read anymore. That's when I would drop the book.
But why add so much to X-Men? Why add so much burden on the minority to prove themselves? That's my question.
Because do we want the minority, and I mean, this is coming from a very white mouth here, but do we want the minority to just assume the position of the majority, or do the minority to start a conversation that nobody in the majority would start?
But okay, so let me say something here, which I think is somewhere in between the two of you. See, when I read this whole issue, there is a little bit of dissatisfaction with that sort of like came up, and the dissatisfaction doesn't come from this issue alone, but it comes from the period between the end of Exosource and Hellfire Gala, because I find that the stories, most of the stories between those two periods, during that period, the so-called Reign of X, is not going anywhere, and then we relaunch the first X-Men, and it's like, oh, it's the same. The X-Men are back, and and they just fought some other creatures. But here is the difference. This is not the same X-Men as before. They are not fighting for acceptance here. they are not fighting for survivor. There's no Terrigen Mist, there's no hate group here. So they are just superheroes like any other superhero groups in Marvel Universe. And I do not think we ever had that with an X-Men book.
Exactly.
Well,
and that's exactly, like, even then, they were kind of fighting, and exactly to that point, I was like, why do we then add the layer of they have to justify why they bought this place?
But they didn't justify it.
They didn't justify it.
The comic did. They are not saying it, but the comic did.
Well, from the human perspective.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. So why add that element? I just don't know. I mean, it's a nice. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I'm saying, but it's just, I feel like, okay, so what is that telling us then? What is that telling us? That every time we do something, we have to justify our existence. We have to tell why we are doing this, how we are actually reclaiming something. We can't just go and claim something anymore. Is that what the thing is? And it can't come, like, it kind of made me it really did give me a negative reaction about that.
But it's okay? So my counterpoint would be, is it justifying it or is it praising them for acknowledging it? Because I read it the other way. I read it as, Urich basically saying that, he's praising them for acknowledging it and not just taking it over and stopping and like every other, developers. So,
Well, these are really interesting themes. And I mean, this is, but the fact that we can even have this conversation, I think shows that we are still in the Age of Krakoa. Because if you look at the X-Men books, between 2012 and 2019, there was very little of thematic import to have this conversation about. Like, I did do some of this back in 2017 and 2018, and it was kind of just like, here's the plot has happened, because it wasn't a book about big things. And I think that, like, the thing that I want X-Men to be about, A, I want it to be the best book in comics, and I would like to get there. It's not even, I don't even have any X books in my top 20 right now, but B, I would like the X-Men to be about big things. But let's go to the small things for a second.
Okay.
We have this team in the Treehouse. The Treehouse is there so that there's a team that feels like they don't have to just say all of our houses are on Krakoa. Now, of course, 2 members of this team actually live on the moon, but let's not get too twisted here, because some of them are using this kind of as their away base. And we see that, Sync is putting it together by borrowing the powers of Forge. And so Forge is there too. That Tempo, who was almost on the team, was our endorsed candidate for the team, help them grow this tree from a tiny seedling. And we see Polaris moving in with her bags. Wolverine has already moved in with her bags and is like, yeah, fine, I'm in my room, leave me alone. And Rogue is already out patrolling and kind of being a hero. And I really liked a lot of this little chatter. I've seen some people say that it felt flat. I did not think it felt flat at all. I mean, it was great. Like Cyclops saying to Polaris, whatever it is you're about to confess, don't tell me that you killed, you were the one that killed Wanda. Polaris being like, don't we have any interns? Like, it just felt like a team that actually has got a personality and are not just speechifying all the time. And I like that. But did that ring for the two of you as well? Or did it fall a little bit more flat for you? What about you? I mean, you've been mentioning Sasclops.
No, Tyler did. No, I really liked it. And, it's like, at least when the Wanda thing was mentioned, I was like, finally, it's actually someone is happening, but then it's also his daughter, and has no reaction to that. So that was also something like, okay, so then where's the story going with that?
It was dark. It was just some dark humor. Like, tell me, as long as you're telling me you're not killing your ex-sister, and Polaris is like,
like, so there's like a lot of that layer going on. I almost kind of lost my mind. It's like, oh, this room is bigger, and then followed by Wolverine. I'm like, oh, what do you mean? What's going on? I'm like, oh, okay, hold on, it's the other Wolverine. Like,
because Gabby is going to live there sometimes. It's because Jonathan's moving in.
Like, probably, but the thing is, like, and that to that point, that was not mentioned because we know where Gabby is. So there was none of that. So I think it makes sense that time-wise and how we are reading it as well. And all of that. I was also creeped out by the thing. Jean's like, oh yeah, I was eavesdropping. I'm like, stop doing that, please. Please, everyone, just stop.
The two of them have a rapport.
I was like, please, for the love of God. But I really like the science behind the tree. The tree looks really good. I think like the whole team getting together was done very well. We know these people, and then chop, chop, chop. It does comes to the problem, like if you don't know any of these people, you're like, okay, who are they?
I mean,
like, that's
yeah, I don't think it
something-
gave us any like definitional moment. I don't think it.
No.
I think
That's
it kind
the
of
thing.
assumed that we actually know these characters pretty
No,
well,
yeah.
and it was not going to take a lot of time to be like, my
That's-
name's Rogue. I'm missing my love Gambit and cherry pie. It's like it just, it didn't really do all that.
Rogue is like full on Claremont instead of
But Rogue is also the character in this cast that Duggan has written the most. Probably the character that Duggan has written the most at all of Marvel after Deadpool is Rogue because of his run on Uncanny Avengers.
Right, and that's the thing that because I kind of expected better from Duggan from that point of view because he's always the best who is giving you all the backstory but bringing you in. I feel like it was the same problem with X Factor, Elwing Sword, and all of that, where it's like the character are just like, here are the characters, who are they? You have read all the other ones. No, I didn't, sir. Bam. And it's like, too bad. So it kind of falls in that a little bit.
I mean, that's the thing. While I'm not the biggest fan of Sunfire, it does seem weird to have this team book that is already mostly white and hardly features him.
You could be forgiven for totally forgetting he was in it. I mean, he's in 3 panels, 2 panels. Not that everybody's going to get so much shine. Yeah. I feel like this issue is very much the Sync issue. And maybe we're going to get the Sunfire issue next. Probably. So I don't want to pass too much judgment.
And then he will leave.
Yeah, and then he'll quit.
He'll quit.
I mean, but on that point, I'm also kind of annoyed that the first villain introduced is a POC.
Oh, I like that. No, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that.
I don't like it.
We're going to get to the villains.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Stick with the X-Men. Stick with me for the X-Men for 2 more minutes.
Then let's stay there. I'm not so sure about the characterization of Polaris. She seemed kind of princessy here. It's like, I mean, when she moved into the boneyard, she didn't even, I mean, it wasn't that way, right? Like here, she's like, oh, I have so many luggage and like, would somebody help me? But then she's like, but then I was thinking, but then later on, she was like using her powers to move the luggage. So why does she need interns?
Yeah, kind of. Now that you're like digging into it, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, and it wasn't very consistent with her X-Factor. I guess I just was happy to see anybody making small talk in X-Men after the Hickman books. I'm like, small talk. I'm so happy. Now that we're digging into it, I'm like, actually, none of it made sense whatsoever. But at least it was.
I mean, and the walkthrough. Come on, we have seen it done better. Even though the art is spectacular, but the walkthrough of the treehouse, we have seen it done better.
It was confusing.
Oh yeah.
Yep. It was like the layout was kind of weird. So
and then they said like on this level are the habitats, and I like looked and it's like actually the habitats are on multiple levels and they're connected to multiple levels. So why was like it felt like the script and the art, the execution, the art were totally separate from each other. By way of getting into from the X-Men to the villains, let's talk about their confrontation here, and then we'll segue into talking about the villains. So, Rogue's on patrol, and I have to say, there's a lot of hints this week for me that call back to Uncanny X-Men 246 through 249, because it really reminds me of Rogue being on patrol in New York and running into what becomes Master Mold as Master Mold combines with Nimrod. Just especially when the tentacle grabs her or like knocks her back here in the fight, I was like, oh my gosh, they're gonna kill Rogue, because that is how Rogue winds up going through the Siege Perilous the first time. Mm-hmm. But there's this theme of mutant machines, which is, again, a way you're still reading the Krakoan Age. And there's already kind of a mutant machine happening in the treehouse between Forge, Sync, and Tempo, who's not seen here. But then they are like, well, let's forge a mutant machine out here in the field as well. Except for Duggan makes it literal, and the X-Men form Voltron. I have so many things to say about this. Not a single one is positive. So I will jump to Tyler first, and then we'll do Fariha, and then I'll unleash my torrent on you all.
I'm confused with the Voltron thing because I don't know what everyone is doing. Like, Sunfire with that, is he supposed to be powering the Voltron?
Yeah, I think if there was a better artist, it might have been clearer.
and they also got the X in there somehow.
Yeah.
That bothered me because like why do we have time to do art project?
It's like, and it's like the X.
It's there. Yeah, it's like it's there.
Well, Sync gave them the idea because there's a plot reason because Sync is still connected to Forge, and Forge would very quickly give the somatic. So then Gene links Sync with Polaris, and Polaris makes it to Sync's via Forge's specifications. I mean, there is a plot reason.
Yeah, but
they want to have the ability to blast.
What I think would be the best. What I think would make sense for
engineering problems with
a mutant machine here would be say Sync, Gene, and Polaris basically combining their powers.
Exactly, and
because Gene is telekinetic and Polaris is her magnetic powers, and then with Sync basically syncing himself with like those two powers. That's all they need. They don't need Sunfire's energy. They don't need Cyclops' single eye for the machine because the Voltron has one eye. Or maybe the Voltron has two eyes, and that is the mouth, and Cyclops is the mouth.
Well, he's got a whole glowing row of dots, like it almost looks like a celestial.
That's true.
But then one of them's
and then you have like Rogue and Wolverine like trying to control using cables.
Yeah, Wolverine's not that strong. Like she can't lift its whole leg with cables, but then with Rogue, you can't even tell that her hand is holding onto him. It looks like they're coming out of her arm. So I'm like, did Rogue turn into a robot? Like, who did she touch? The art was so unclear. I couldn't.
I have a question.
All the way from when it's assembled to when X-23 gets kicked, I was lost. I just could not figure out what was happening.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, for me, it's like, okay, I feel like this needed to be a flashy entrance for X-Men. That was the whole point, and they did that. But the thing is, like, at the same time, it's like, I just didn't care for the X that is like, it's gonna blast like ball like this, like what is the point of that? So I didn't even pay attention to any of this because I'm like, they're just trying to make like a big city and we're here, or it's a splash. Don't think too much about it. That was the whole point. And I was mostly, I'm like, what kind of like disrespectful thing they're gonna say to Avengers and X Fantastic? I'm like, oh, it's okay. It's like the heroes are like, welcome back, we missed you. And I was like, isn't that nice?
Yeah, and Spider-Man didn't even speak to them. Spider-Man just honestly glad I didn't have to clock this one in.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, is that what that was? I couldn't figure it out because the art, it was so small.
Well,
I puzzled over that forever.
So here's the thing. I think that's Miles. I think that's not Peter. I think that's Miles, because Miles usually is like very annoyed by having to clock things in. So
I'm zoomed on it so far, and it's just like a little blue dot.
It's very bluish.
Yeah, so I think it's potentially Miles, because he's always kind of scared about, like, not scared, but he's always like, I'm glad I didn't have to deal with that. So
okay, while we are talking about art, here, I do feel like the art is a little bit less refined in this issue. Like some of the lines are, some of the panels are a little bit sketchy.
I think a lot of my concerns have come out. And I know I'm playing my character right now where I'm super caustic and I say like, well, if there was a better artist, but honestly, I just didn't like it at all. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. I think sometimes people think I'm doing this like just to play the part of the person who is dissenting, but these are my real feelings. Like, I really found this art to be pretty incoherent and not very attractive. I don't know what you want me to say. So I just thought the fight didn't make any sense, but beyond how bad every framing choice was, the entirety of the fight, I come to like, this felt like a very, okay, it's mutant machines and some people are not getting the point. So let's make machines literal. What's really big in comics right now? Oh, a lot of people are doing kaiju stuff and giant robot stuff. It's a really big thing. And it's a lot of comics are launching with that. Let's have the X-Men do it. It just felt like very intentionally zeitgeisty in a way that I don't expect from X-Men comics, in a way where X-Men, it's kind of like following the trend instead of setting the trend, whereas X-Men has like set the trend with data pages. Now you're starting to see it in comics all over the place are using data pages. Yes. Eternals are using data pages. Nice House on the Lake this week used data pages. Like, it's a thing now. And I want to see X-Men innovate, but instead it kind of just felt like they were being a follower. But more than that, in this issue that's about this team, this new mutant machine, these new mutants with powers, we're really going to devote several pages to them all just being in this like giant robot and punching thing. Like, give me moments with these mutants. That's why I bought this book. I want to see Sunfire exploding, not shooting it through the X in the chest. I want to see Polaris like throw, like, I don't care. It made me really tune out. I was like, and it was the only moment in this book where I had this moment of, if this is what it's about, then maybe we aren't in the Age of Krakoa, you know? If it's all about finding these cool KEWL moments to have giant mutant Voltrons punch giant Martian things, then maybe I'm out. But it was only a fleeting moment, and there was a lot of other things that were positive for me. But I know I'm an outlier, but it just really could not have fallen more flat for me. So I think if there was a total other fight in the middle other than this fight, this would be like a 4 or 5 star comic for me. But this fight like took the wind out of my sails.
So I think like it came down to the whole thing of like every X-Men comic, and then even this is like about introducing themes, introducing villains, introducing like what we're going to be dealing with. And they like, you know, Duggan knew, you know, these characters. So I'm not going to explain anymore because you've already read the previous X-Men where Synth and Wolverine had a moment. We know Cyclops and you know, and then Sunfire, no one knows, who cares. Rogue is very popular. Polaris is some, Rogue is Rogue. Yeah. Sunfire is pretty, like, sorry, Polaris is pretty popular. So he's like, okay, I'm not gonna waste, like, you know, like here's a fight because we need to have a fight, but look at this new bad guy. Like,
well, let's talk about the bad. Let's bring on the bad guy, shall we? So
before we go to the bad guy, before we go to the bad guy, can we talk about Urich up in Sasclop's business?
Yeah, Sasclop. Yeah, I mean, come on, Sasclop. Look at the way he passed through the elevator gate. She's like, oh, his arch is back, and then his face is like, slow. I was laughing so hard because that is so uncyclops. To me,
like, someone said that he took a whole page. I think someone said it on Twitter, or I don't know where I read this, but I read it somewhere. Like, the homeboy took a whole page to go. Like, he took a whole one page to leave. Like, you know, just talking from the gate, and it's just stand in one place and deliver the message and then go. But what I am just kind of like, okay, because, and this is another one of the in-universe problem that I have a very huge problem with. Why on earth Urich is surprised by people coming back from death?
He wants to know the how. It's surprising, but how? Is it a clone? Is it a resurrection? Like, that's it. He's a journalist. He wants to know the how. The surprising thing isn't that he's dead. It's that nobody's mentioned how he's back.
But people come back all the time in Marvel Universe, and nobody answers that question. That's what I'm saying.
But this is Jumbo. This is like a nobody. You know what I mean?
Like, I mean, he's a mutant. He's a hero. I mean, so
he's a
I mean, that's why I was like, okay, but Urich, come on. You've seen Spider-Man come back so many times, and you work with Spider-Man. Like, why is this a problem? Okay, why is this a thing?
But to be fair, this is an idea that that Duggan has been seeding for a long time. Like all the way back to Marauders number 4, he has already seeded this idea that someone has noticed that the population doesn't make sense. And then of course, I think in one of the X-Force issue, like Beast spyware overheard someone talking about, oh yeah, you know, someone who is hanging out with Patsy, and it's like, oh yeah, you know, the mutant population doesn't make sense. So there has been some seed of this going on. So I think he's just bringing it up to the forefront here.
So, and to your point, many people have come back, but have we had 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000? I mean, we are several orders of magnitude bigger in the idea of people coming back, which is kind of like rustling around. And maybe Ben is seizing on Jumbo Carnation because he's seen the body. I mean, you could argue for a lot of these other mutants of like, it's kind of like, this was my cousin. You've never met him before. It's my cousin, you know, Mumbo, Tarnation. Yeah. You need Mumbo, Tarnation. Like, they're introducing an actual mutant whose body Ben has seen. Yeah. And this raises the larger question of like, these are a lot of mutants that have been presumed dead, aren't they?
So that's what I'm talking about, that fact that he's focusing on one mutant instead of thousands. You know,
but he has seen that one.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay,
I think that's what Peter is. He's seen that one.
I'll give you that. But the thing is, here's also, and to that point, there is another thing. I am shocked that how long it has been from Hoxpox to now. We did never establish that, right? From Hoxpox to now. The fact that there's like a whole research done is like, in order to keep a secret, how many people you can, how many people you can say before the secret got out.
Yeah.
The number of people they resurrected, there is no way it's a secret. Like it can't possibly be.
Well, I mean, yeah, the satellites would be like bing, 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 like you see everything coming.
But in a way, it's been kind of disguised by the addition of Urich, like because they almost gave themselves cover by having Urich, because I'm sure, like as we saw in the notes that were in Planet Size X-Men, that people have been tracking the population has been exploding, but then they had to explain this new landmass too, which Cap talks to Cyclops about. So it's like almost like they've almost given themselves cover. And then also there was like a bunch of like dead zombie mutants on Genosha during Empire. So it's almost like they've had plausible deniability kind of up until now. But now finally Ben Urich is like, wait a second, I'm making my serial killer board with the strings. And the photo is like, something about this is not adding up, people. And like, I think you're right, Tyler. I think Duggan has been the one who has been like tying these threads together all along. And he's finally going to make people start asking the question, which is a perfect segue into the villainy here. Because here's what's so interesting about this group of opposing forces, which we could put Ben Urich into in a way. He's not a villain, but he is an opposing force because the Cyclops does not want to get too close to, based in this opening scene. These are not people who hate the mutants because they're different. None of them are. Nobody in this issue hates them because they're different. They're hating them because they're successful. But you can't take away the fact that they're different from the fact that they're being successful. They're inextricable. Many humans were successful, but they didn't inspire these villains. They're inspired by the mutants because you know what? Hate finds a way. They, even though it's not explicitly about them being different, these same people are coming to smack them down. So I'm going to turn it over to Tyler because he's so patient. But just to name them, we do have Ben Urich opposing, if not a villain. We have Kelvin Heng, aka Feilong.
So is that...
And we have Gameworld with both Cordyceps Jones and the High Evolutionary. And then we have the Oblivion Institute, which Tyler and I conspired and have decided is meant to be separate from Kelvin Heng and Feilong. And I think you're supposed to think that this weird tentacle creature is related to the Oblivion Institute, but it's not quite explicit yet. So really, we're talking about 5 potential opposing forces here. And that is where I will turn it over to Tyler.
Oh, no. So as I was saying earlier, I was kind of annoyed that the first villain introduced in the first few pages of X-Men #1 is a person of color, and it made it a little bit more stark by the fact that the team itself is mostly white, and that kind of like, I was actually pretty annoyed by that. And then the other question is this: Feilong.
Does it mean something naughty?
Yeah.
No, Feilong by the wording itself, I guess is meant to be like flying dragon.
Oh.
So Feilong, right?
Going to Mars, flying dragon, better than an Elon Musk company name.
Yes. But the problem is Fei can also, if the enunciation is slightly different, becomes Feilong, which is like fat dragon. So
no matter which way you look at it.
So yeah.
So wait, give us the two. Pronounce it like flying dragon.
Feilong.
And then pronounce it like fat dragon.
Feilong.
Interesting. Well, I think it's time for Tyler to submit a question to X-Men Monday on Adventures in Poor Taste next time Duggan's going to be there, because we need to know, is it named Fat Dragon or is it named Flying Dragon?
Flying Dragon. Yeah.
So for me, though, I actually cheered to see a POC as a villain for X-Men. Okay. Because I want now to be, it's now truly about human versus mutant. Not about take all kinds of other intersectionality out. It's about like, you got there before me. I hate you. Like, it's like... Yeah,
you were fine when you were not achieving. It's fine as long as you're behind me. But since you got there first, now we have a vendetta.
Yeah.
And Feilong, or Feilong, however way you say it, would not care if this was Avengers, Fantastic Four, Kamala Khan. He would not care who it was.
Really?
He would
I think he would.
target them. No,
I think he does.
I didn't get that. He was a true scientist. He is a true scientist who is like, I am going to go to Mars. These mofos went to Mars before me. No, and they did it in a shortcut.
They basically took his plan and made it obsolete because he can no longer go to Mars and terraform it.
No, because it's already done.
And the work that he did transforming himself is useless now.
Exactly.
Like, he made himself something more other, and then they took away his need for that. And he's like, I made myself more than human when I didn't even need to. And now you more than human people took away the whole reason that I mean, that's a very different take on appropriation than Children of the Atom.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. If anyone else did that, he would have been just as pissed. Like, that's what I'm going with this. It's it's a matter of like, it's the same Lex Luthor point where it's like, you've done something when you've done it in a shortcut. He hates Superman, not because, Superman, he's an alien, he's powerful. He does it because like, you always do it with a shortcut and I don't like you because of that. And he has the same motivation for that. And I'm kind of happy to see how this comes in. There better be some conversation of like, I had to like do this to white people to get there, or like I had to be marginalized potentially as an Asian. Maybe there was like, the whole good minority, or they're always smart, that representation, that stereotype. Like I had to do all of this. I had to always be staying up to it, and you surpassed me just because you got lucky. Like,
part of it is that he's also lucky because he's a prodigy. He's a genius.
Oh yeah, he's not gonna see that. Like that's the villainy. That's the villainy. If he saw that, then he would be Tony Stark. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't believe that. He's like, I've done it. Like, I've done it when I was 13. Like, I graduated from MIT. How dare you took a shortcut and go ahead? So to me, I feel like if anyone did that shortcut, anyone made him obsolete, he would still be just as pissed. And he's like, so I don't know.
I actually have come around to your position. The one little shading that I would put onto that, though, is if it was a human, some human competitor, or some human team or whatever, he would maybe still be responding of like, okay, well, this is like a business problem. Like, I can outflank them. I can buy them. I can hostilely take over their company. I can turn public opinion against them. But because it's the X-Men, he's like, I don't have any recompense against them. They're just mutants. It's a whole cultural thing. Like, I can't take my usual avenues, so I'm going to make them pay in a different way, which I think it's just a slight shade of different response. But how great, I mean, praise words due. Duggan does this in 3 pages. There's not even a lot of panels. I mean, we're talking about 11 panels in 3 pages. And I'm ready. I want to see what he's angry about. I want to see what his history is. I want to know all of it. I'm so much more interested in him than like all of Orcus right now. Like, I just think this guy is compelling.
Right. And then that's the thing. Maybe he will take down Orcus because I will take them down. You won't.
Right.
Like, so it's, I don't know. I mean, it feels like even it's like, this is the first, I was shocked to see this is the first appearance because I thought that this was,
I know, I went on Marvel Wiki because the other, we're going to get to in a second, one of these other characters is from somewhere else.
Right. I was shocked to see that it was so effective in the very first appearance. Like, he was formidable, very much like, I recently read Justin Aaron's God Butcher, like, Thoran, just as like, wait, God Butcher was a formidable, and it was like first appearance. I was like, oh, I'm scared. Like, and there was also the conversation, was it in this one or somewhere? There was like 4, it all ran together. That, different people coming together in the same evolution.
That was
like
in X-Force.
Coming
to the same point in
same point,
Convergent
advancement,
evolution, or
term, So, and it's happening. Like, seems like he's also doing the resurrection, human resurrection. He's doing that.
Oh, so you are of the opinion that Oblivion is him?
Yes. No, it's not.
Tyler, here's the debate that Tyler and I are having. I think Oblivion is meant to be yet another different villain.
it would be like,
shoot!
Like, so they are,
I read it.
so
I don't know. You can read it
introduced-
either way.
No, you can read it either way because the monologue can be placed to him, or it could be placed, as something else. So basically, Feilong is kind of upset that the mutant powers has overtaken his technological power, and then you have the Oblivion, who's like the mutant power of resurrection has taken over.
Yes.
See, so there's different advancement in the mutant society now,
Uh-huh.
and different fractions are getting upset because it has overtaken like all they have been trying to do.
Oh, so this changes a lot of things for me. Then he's not that interesting. Because the thing is like...
Free retract that whole conversation.
Well, okay. So he just like had one thing of terraform. But I thought that, how was he changing himself? I thought he was changing himself by the technology.
Well, that's what made me confused, but I feel like they would have let off with a different caption that way, because it starts with deep in the ground in a particularly evil part of New Jersey. That's the joke. It's all evil in New Jersey. The Oblivion Institute, Dr. Stasis presiding. Like, I think if they really wanted us to think that it was the same thing as Feilong, it would have said the Feilong facility of the Oblivion Institute, or like Dr. Stasis presiding on the behalf of Kelvin Heng or whatever, because the whole opening was about how he's this big super genius. I think if they're supposed to be the same thing, it would have been way more explicit that they're the same thing. I think it's different. Okay, but I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm truly confused.
Yeah. Because the thing is, like, I thought that the way he was talking at the beginning, like, and where his scene ends and where the scene began, I thought that he was upset that one thing failed, but he has multiple things going on, and he's like coming back to the other thing. And I thought Dr. Stasis is like his other name or something. I don't know.
Well, because it's a very personal monologue, right? Dr. Stasis says there's too much to discover, too much to accomplish. So I work for the betterment of all mankind, which is a different mission. Feilong just wants to do it. But Dr. Stasis thinks that they're being like altruistic in some way. But so here's the other question. Are we meant to think that this crazy thing that they fought with the robot, is that from Dr. Stasis, or is that yet a separate villain?
No, that's a Gameworld.
That's from the Gameworld.
It's from Gameworld? Okay, well, let's go to Gameworld now. So Gameworld has this crazy fungal leader person, Cordyceps Jones, who is from Al Ewing during his run on Rocket. And the High Evolutionary is just in the background, like sipping a cocktail here.
Yeah.
So here's even more opposing forces. Tyler, what did you think about this one?
I thought this is an interesting thing because it's like, it introduced a little bit of like a game master into this whole conflict, because all they want is that we just want the planet. The pesky humans and their protectors are in the way, and that's all they are. They are not.
It's not about mutants. It's the mutants just happen to get far enough to register on our annoyance scale, but this is not about mutants.
It's not about them. It's just that they happen to be there first, and therefore we're upset. And then I mean, obviously High Evolutionary is kind of involved in this, like, so he's like, but he's not saying anything. He's just sipping his cocktail and enjoying.
Isn't High Evolutionary is the one who told Wanda that she's no longer a mutant? Yeah. Someone named High Evolutionary should not be against mutant. Like, that just an oxymoron. That should not happen. Because your whole thing about a messy history.
Evolution. High Evolutionary, though, like he wants his version of evolution. Like he wants to manage all of the lines. He wants to prune the people who are going to be pruned. Like he wants to be the gardener of all evolution on Earth, which if you really want to understand him, go to the Evolutionary War annual crossovers in 1987 or 88 and read all the backup stories, because they're his whole origin. Now, further things have been inserted later, including his connection with Sinister. But I actually recently read it, and it's a really good primer on kind of like who he was originally intended to be. And again, I come back to a theme that I personally discussed with Mr. Hickman back in 2013 on the ye old CBR message boards. He was doing a Q&A and asked me anything about his Avengers launch. And I said, is there anything to this idea that, Earth keeps innovating these things. It has these Avengers before we even knew what Avengers World was. And he was like, yes, that's actually the point. And it's kind of like the Avengers ran afoul of that. Earth kind of became the center. It was Earth that was colliding with each other and being incursioned in that run. Well, here we go again. Now the X-Men are making a target of Earth. Earth has outreached its grasp in the view of some people on the interstellar stage. And it doesn't matter if the mutants did it or the Avengers did it or the Fantastic Four did it, but it's now time to crush them under their heel. And this doesn't even get into the fact that there's a whole new currency that, they're talking about, making wagers and it paying off for them to go and crush mutants. What happens when they find out the thing it's going to pay off on is the metal developed by the mutants? So there's layers on layers on layers on layers. I think we're in for a lot of fun in this X-Men run. I really think we are.
And the one thing I was going to say that I mentioned it before, though, I hate it when it's like, oh yeah, the Earth, there's no one knows anything. Finally, someone's like, yeah, Earth is a formidable foe. Let's go crush them.
Let's crush them under our...
Yeah. We can't have them running around wild. Like, what is this? So yeah.
And then you have the return of Brooke.
The who?
The lawyer. He's like,
oh yeah.
Has Araco caused you distress?
That was really funny.
Have you ever lived in Soul's fourth world?
Yeah. Have you ever lived there? Did you use your house taken away? Yeah. We may have a law.
Bringing us back to the beginning of our conversation, because Blurred is saying, has the mutants kind of displaced anybody who has a right to Mars, and were you compensated? Which I'll just leave there. So that has been our discussion of X-Men #1. Wow. Turns out that, but double length issues get double length discussions. That's often the case here on this channel. And Fariha, why do we have these giant sized discussions?
Because X-Men is better when it's read together.
And this one, it might just seem like lightweight superhero fare, but hopefully, if you felt that way, or I assume you probably didn't if you're the person who listens to or watches the show, hopefully you see that reading it together reveals there are a lot of layers beneath this idea of superhero fare. We are firmly in the age of Krakoa, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. So on the behalf of Fariha, Tyler, myself, and Harry, who is somewhere in the Florida Everglades right now hunting a small horny alligator, one would assume. We want to thank you for watching.
Literal horny, not like
horned alligator.
Yeah,
well, we don't know.
Golden horn,
I think alligator.
There's no spoilers. There's no spoilers. So this has been This Week in X. Please tune back in next week for more of us talking about X-Men comics. And until we get to see you again, we hope that you are well.
Bye.
Bye.